My name is Isla Marin, 29 years old. The morning sun streamed through my small Portland apartment, cutting across the kitchen table where a chipped mug of coffee sat cooling beside a potted basil plant. I had bought the plant the same week I moved here, a promise to myself that I'd keep something alive in this new life. Oregon light was different from Virginia light, cleaner, sharper, as if it had nothing to hide. I had just taken a slow sip when the phone buzzed against the counter. The number glowed on the screen like a ghost, a number I hadn't seen in months, maybe longer. My first instinct was to let it ring out, let it dissolve into the mechanical hush of voicemail. But old habits have long claws. My thumb swiped before I could stop it. Isla. Not a greeting, not even my full name, just the clipped tone of my mother, Lorena. Her voice carried the same sharpness I remembered from my childhood, the kind that cut off questions before they were asked. We need you home next month. Felicity's wedding is in 3 weeks. It's important you're there. I set the mug down carefully, as if sudden movement might shatter it. Why? A dry laugh drifted through the line, incredulous, as though I'd asked why people need air. Because her fiancé's family is very traditional. Family is everything to them. They need to see we're united. A perfect family. Perfect family. The phrase landed like a cruel joke, rolling around my chest until it burned. I'm not coming. Silence. A silence so sharp I could almost taste the metal of it. You're her sister, my mother said at last, her tone hardening, finding the familiar rhythm of command. You can't just... I can, I interrupted. And I am. On the other end, her voice dropped lower into that warning register I'd known since childhood, the one that came just before punishment. If you don't show up, you'll regret it. 8 months of distance pressed down between us, heavy as a wall. I leaned back against the counter, my eyes drifting to the rectangle of sky beyond the balcony. I had lived across the country nearly a year without a single call, a single question about how I was doing. Why start caring now? What are you talking about? My mother asked, her voice quick, almost startled. I let the question hang there, unspoken truths gathering in the pause. Finally, I said evenly, Enjoy the wedding, Mom. And before she could answer, I tapped the screen. The apartment fell silent again, so quiet that even the hum of the refrigerator sounded too loud. I picked up my coffee, but it was already cold, a thin film collecting on the surface. I turned the phone face down, the sunlight warming the back of my hand. For a long moment, I let the silence stretch, my chest filling with something equal parts relief and dread. Then my mind wandered back to the day I had walked away from Virginia. 8 months ago, my old apartment had looked like the aftermath of a yard sale nobody showed up for, boxes stacked in uneven towers, furniture half wrapped in blankets, shelves bare except for dust lines where picture frames used to sit. Marcus knelt near the bookshelf, sliding paperbacks into a box, while Jenna sealed another carton labeled Kitchen. You're really doing this, Jenna said, her voice a mix of pride and disbelief. Really doing it, I confirmed, shoving another sweater into a vacuum bag. Neither of them had asked why I hadn't told my family. They already knew. I couldn't stomach one more performance of fake concern before they pivoted back to Felicity, like they always did. The memory spilled further back, uninvited. Me, at 8 years old, standing in the kitchen, clutching a blue ribbon from the state science fair. I'd built a model volcano that mirrored real eruption patterns, the kind my teacher said might win national prizes someday. My parents glanced at it for all of 3 seconds before asking if I'd ironed Felicity's choir dress for her recital. At 12, I'd made honor roll every semester. No one mentioned it. A month later, Felicity's volleyball team advanced to regionals, and my dad bought a brand new grill, threw a party big enough to block off half the street. By 18, I thought maybe college would be my redemption arc, the moment they'd finally see me. Instead, they sat me down, solemn-faced, and told me the education fund had already gone to Felicity's private university. You'll figure something out, they'd said. And I had. 2 part-time jobs, a full scholarship in computer science, summers crammed into apartments with roommates who treated me better than my own blood. Christmas and Thanksgiving invites stopped coming somewhere along the way. My birthday texts reduced to one line, happy birthday, no phone calls, no warmth. And yet, I didn't chase them. I stopped asking for scraps of their attention. That day, standing among half-packed boxes, I knew I'd never go back to waiting for them to notice me. I closed that door for good. The first morning in Portland, I'd woken to the sound of rain against my new windows. Not the violent, punishing downpour of Virginia storms, but a soft rhythm, steady and unhurried, like a welcome. The apartment wasn't much. Outdated cabinets, a bedroom barely wide enough for a full bed, but the view from the balcony made up for it. Mountains in the distance, their peaks crowned with snow, rising beyond a skyline that felt alive yet forgiving. The job had been worth the move, too. A mid-sized tech company where my input mattered, where collaboration didn't feel like warfare. My manager, Dana, checked in not to control me, but to ask if I had what I needed. For the first time, I wasn't treated like I should be grateful just to exist in the room. Best of all, no one here knew my family. No awkward questions about holiday plans, no polite pity when I admitted we weren't close. The one exception was Grandma Winslow. Every Sunday, her name lit up my screen. She never asked why I left. She never begged me to return. She just celebrated every small thing, my first client project, my weekend hikes, even the basil plant growing on my balcony. "That's lovely, Isla," she'd say in her warm, lilting voice. "You're building something for yourself. I'm proud of you." Her words always landed somewhere deep in a place hollowed out long ago by indifference. I never told her how much I needed them. She already knew. By the time 8 months had passed, Portland's rhythms had become my own. Coffee with the mountains, work that challenged but didn't consume me, quiet weekends where my phone stayed blissfully silent. I thought I had built something untouchable. But that Tuesday morning, my mother's voice had cut straight through it, unraveling everything. And as I stood in my kitchen now, staring at the phone turned face down on the counter, I couldn't shake the feeling that her call was only the beginning. Something was coming. Something I wouldn't be able to ignore. When I ended that call with my mother, I thought the silence that followed would bring me peace. Instead, it pulled me backward, into rooms I'd tried to board up, into memories I'd painted over but never erased. Childhood shadows always have a way of creeping back when you least expect them. I was 8 years old when I learned that my victories didn't matter. The science fair had been everything to me. I'd built a volcano that did more than fizz baking soda foam. It mimicked the eruption patterns of Mount St. Helens, complete with colored layers of ash. My teacher had called home to tell my parents how exceptional it was. I remember clutching that blue ribbon so tightly my palms sweated ink. That night, I stood at the dinner table, waiting for their reaction. My father barely looked up from his plate. My mother glanced at the ribbon, then asked if I'd ironed Felicity's white choir dress for her recital. Within minutes, the conversation had shifted, swallowed whole by Felicity's big solo, her angelic voice, how the neighbors would surely come to watch. I ate in silence, my ribbon limp in my hand. At 12, I made the honor roll every semester. The certificate was still warm from the printer when I placed it carefully on the kitchen counter, hoping they'd see it when they came home. That evening, Dad didn't even mention it. Instead, he burst through the door with balloons and barbecue supplies. Felicity's volleyball team had made it to regionals. "This deserves a real celebration," he said, slapping my shoulder as if that counted as acknowledgement. I told myself it didn't hurt, but it did. By 15, I stopped expecting them to notice. Still, there were moments when the neglect cut deeper than usual. One year, my birthday fell on the same weekend as Felicity's school play. Everyone was so busy sewing costumes and baking cupcakes for the cast party that they forgot. No cake, no card, not even a rushed happy birthday. I spent that evening in my room, candles lit from a dollar store pack I'd bought myself, whispering wishes into the quiet. I never told them they'd forgotten. Part of me wanted to see if they'd remember on their own. They didn't. But the worst blow came at 18. I had been accepted to a university in-state, thrilled at the thought of studying computer science with a scholarship to cover most of the tuition. One night, my parents called me into the living room, their faces heavy, as though preparing for grief. "We need to be realistic," my father said. "We already used the education fund." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, used?" "It went toward Felicity's private university," my mother explained, her tone as if she were discussing household bills. "She needs the environment, the opportunities. You'll figure something out, Isla. You've always been resourceful." It wasn't just money they were taking from me. It was the acknowledgement that I mattered as much as she did, that my future deserved investment too. So I worked. 2 part-time jobs, full scholarship, summers spent crammed in apartments with strangers who became more like family than my blood ever had. Looking back, I realize now what those years taught me. Independence wasn't a choice. It was survival. Still, even survival has scars. I remember one particular night, just before I left Virginia. I was packing for a regional coding competition I'd qualified for, one that could lead to internships, maybe even scholarships. Felicity walked into my room without knocking, wearing a brand new designer dress. "Mom says you'll have to skip your trip," she announced casually. "We're going to the city this weekend. Dad wants us all together." I stared at her, stunned. "What are you talking about? I've been preparing for months." She shrugged, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "It's just computers. This is important. You'll understand someday." She didn't even notice the way my hands shook as I zipped my suitcase shut anyway, deciding I would go whether they approved or not. That was one of the first times I truly defied them. I remember standing at the bus station alone, clutching my ticket, the air biting cold, and feeling both terrified and free. That weekend, I won second place. No one in my family even knew. I carried all of these small wounds like stones in my pockets, heavy but invisible. Every time my parents forgot, dismissed, or redirected praise, the stones multiplied. By the time I was old enough to leave, I was carrying a mountain. And yet, there was always a part of me that wondered what it would feel like to be seen by them, just once. That longing never fully went away. Even now, 8 months into my new life, my mother's call had clawed at it, reopening the old hunger for recognition. Not because I wanted to go back, but because it proved they remembered I existed, if only as a prop in Felicity's perfect tableau. When I set the phone aside that morning in Portland, my chest tightened with conflicting emotions. Relief at saying no, guilt for daring to feel relief, and underneath it all, the same old ache. Why wasn't I ever enough? I looked around my small apartment. Boxes of books lined one wall, a thrift store couch sat across from the window, and my basil plant leaned toward the light. It was modest, but it was mine. I had built a life without them. But I also knew, with a certainty that settled cold in my bones, that they weren't finished with me. My mother's threats weren't idle. Felicity's wedding was just the spark. The firestorm was still coming. And somewhere in the shadows of my childhood, I could hear the echo of my father's voice, the same one that had dismissed me all those years ago. Family is everything. Everything except me. When I first arrived in Portland, the city greeted me with rain. Not the violent, hammering kind that split the sky in Virginia, but a steady rhythm, soft and patient, like fingers tapping lightly on the glass. I remember lying in bed that first night, staring at a ceiling I hadn't learned to hate yet, and thinking, this feels like a beginning. The apartment wasn't much. Just one bedroom, outdated cabinets, a bathroom that smelled faintly of bleach no matter how often I scrubbed it. But it was mine. The rent came from my paycheck, the dishes in the cupboard were ones I'd chosen, and the silence belonged entirely to me. For the first time in my life, the air around me didn't feel borrowed. On my second morning, I stepped onto the tiny balcony with a mug of coffee and froze. Mountains stretched across the distance, their peaks still streaked with snow, framed by a skyline that buzzed with quiet life. The view stopped me cold. I leaned against the railing, breathing in air that felt unfiltered, new. I made a silent promise that day. I wouldn't let this place slip through my fingers. Work helped solidify that promise. I had joined a mid-sized tech company, the kind that wasn't flashy enough to make headlines, but stable enough to treat its employees like people. My input mattered. People asked for my opinion without sneering or correcting my tone. My manager, Dana, checked in not to micromanage, but to ask what tools I needed. That first week, she dropped by my desk, a mug of tea in her hands. "Settling in okay?" she asked. I hesitated, waiting for the trick, the inevitable pivot to criticism, the sharp edge hidden in kindness. But it didn't come. "Yes," I said finally. "Better than I expected." Her smile reached her eyes. "Good. We're glad you're here." I carried that sentence home like a fragile treasure. At lunch, coworkers invited me to join their table without hesitation. When deadlines loomed, we worked side by side, not against each other. No competition disguised as camaraderie. No hierarchy that placed me at the bottom before I'd even begun. I didn't realize how starved I'd been for that kind of environment until it was mine. Outside of work, I began learning what solitude without loneliness felt like. Weekends weren't obligations. I didn't have to spend hours pretending to laugh at Felicity's friends' jokes or endure the dull ache of being ignored at family gatherings. Instead, I hiked trails that smelled of pine and wet earth. I read books uninterrupted. I experimented with recipes in my tiny kitchen. And then there was the basil plant. It had started as a whim, a green sprig in a plastic pot at the farmer's market. I repotted it on my balcony and tended to it like it was a secret friend. Every time I watered it, I felt like I was feeding something that reflected me, fragile at first, but determined to grow in its own space. One evening, as I snipped a few leaves for pasta, my phone buzzed. Grandma Winslow's name lit up the screen. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, her voice warm as fresh bread. "How's my Oregon girl doing?" I smiled, sinking into the couch. "Good. Tired, but good. I just got home from work." "You're building something for yourself," she said, as if she could see me through the phone. "I'm proud of you, Isla." Those words always struck a place deep inside me, a place carved hollow by years of being overlooked. Grandma had a way of filling it without even trying. She never asked why I left, never demanded explanations. She celebrated every small thing. The hike I took last weekend, the project I finished at work, even the basil plant. When I told her about it, she chuckled. "That's lovely. Keep it alive and it'll remind you of yourself, stronger than you think." I didn't tell her how much I needed those calls. I think she knew. 8 months passed in a rhythm that felt almost holy. Morning coffee with the mountains, work that challenged me without consuming me, evenings where silence wasn't punishment but peace. Sometimes I'd catch myself standing at the window, phone in hand, realizing I hadn't heard from my parents in weeks, months even. And instead of the old ache, I felt free. But freedom has a way of making you forget the chains you once carried. It tempts you into believing you've broken them for good. One Sunday evening, as Grandma's voice floated through the receiver, she grew quiet for a moment. "Isla," she said softly, "you know your parents, don't you?" I stiffened. "What about them?" "They don't notice what they don't want to notice, but when they do, they'll come knocking. Maybe not with love, maybe not with apologies, but with expectations. They always do." Her words settled heavy in my chest, a warning wrapped in affection. I brushed it off then, laughed it away. They can't expect anything from me now. I'm gone. I've made a life here. Grandma didn't argue, but her silence carried weight. That night, as rain whispered against the windows, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I thought about the basil plant, about the fragile green stem holding up against wind and weather. I told myself I was like that, rooted, safe, untouchable. But deep down, a chill crawled beneath the warmth of my blankets. Because Grandma was rarely wrong. The second call came 2 days later. I was rinsing dishes when the phone buzzed across the counter, the name flashing like an accusation. Mom. For a long moment, I just watched it ring, the sound filling the quiet of my kitchen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some reckless part of me wanted to hear just how far she'd go. I swiped to answer. "Isla," she began, her voice clipped, sharp. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but you need to think about your family. This wedding is important. People will notice if you're not there." I steadied my voice. "I'm not going." Her exhale came fast, jagged. "You're making a mistake you'll regret. Felicity's fiancé comes from a respected family. They expect everyone to be there, looking united." "This isn't about me, Mom," I said slowly. "I've been living in Oregon for 8 months. Did you even know that?" Silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When she spoke again, her tone was brittle, almost cracking. "What are you talking about? You moved across the country without telling us?" "Yes," I said. "And you didn't notice. That should tell you everything." Her voice sharpened, racing through the old cycle, guilt about abandoning family, veiled threats about being unwelcome back, even a half-hearted bribe. "We'll cover your flight if you just come." I ended the call before she could find the tears. Within hours, my phone became a weapon. Dad's texts came in short bursts, like commands barked across a field. "Call your mother. Fix this. Stop embarrassing the family." Moms were sprawling paragraphs, dripping with emotional leverage. "We sacrificed so much for you. How can you repay us like this? Do you want to ruin your sister's big day?" Then came Felicity herself. Her messages started syrupy sweet. "I miss you. Laura, it's been too long. It would mean so much to have you here." For a second, I almost believed her. Almost. Then the next line appeared. "The in-laws want to meet everyone. They'll be looking. Don't make this harder than it has to be." There it was, my role reduced to a prop in her flawless wedding performance. I blocked her number without replying. The quiet afterwards should have felt like relief, but it sat heavy, oppressive, like the pause before a storm. I found myself lying awake at night, phone face down on the nightstand, the silence louder than any ringing. My mind replayed old dinners, where I sat invisible at the table, Felicity's laughter filling the room, while my words slipped unheard into the air. Now, even in Portland, even with mountains outside my window and rain soft against the glass, I felt them pressing in again. One evening, I broke the silence and called Grandma. She answered on the second ring, her voice instantly softening the edges of my day. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. "I know what's happening. Your parents asked me to talk to you." I tensed, bracing for the pitch. But then she surprised me. "I told them I wouldn't. You're an adult. You make your own choices." Relief loosened something in my chest. "Thank you." There was a pause, the kind that felt careful, deliberate. "Isla, I've watched this family dynamic for years. I've seen how your father treats you compared to Felicity. I've tried to speak up, but he won't hear it. Says I'm imagining things." Her voice wavered, carrying years of unspoken weight. "You're not wrong for keeping your distance. You're not wrong for saying no. What you're doing, it's breaking a cycle that's been going on longer than you've been alive." I swallowed hard, staring at the basil plant on the balcony, its leaves trembling in the breeze. "It's not easy." "No," she agreed gently. "But it's necessary, and I'm proud of you for it. Proud of the life you're building, the independence you've fought for. That takes strength." Her words hit a raw place inside me. "You've always been in my corner, and I always will be," she replied. "You're my granddaughter. That's supposed to mean something." We talked for another half hour about my job, the hiking trails I wanted to try, even about the basil plant, which she seemed to love hearing updates on. Not once did she bring up the wedding again. But when we finally said goodbye, her warning lingered. They won't let this go quietly. I stood in the kitchen long after, the shadows deepening around me, my reflection faint in the window glass. I wanted to believe I was untouchable now, that I had built a wall high enough to keep their demands out. But deep down, I knew Grandma was right. This was only the beginning. The call came the evening after the wedding. I was curled up on the couch with a blanket draped over my shoulders, a glass of red wine balanced on the coffee table. For once, I wasn't thinking about them. I was letting the quiet stretch, letting it feel like mine. When the phone buzzed and Grandma's name lit up the screen, I answered before the second ring. Her voice was low, deliberate. "Well," she said, "your absence didn't go unnoticed." I leaned back, my pulse quickening. "What happened?" "They tried to cover for you at first," she said. "Told the bride's family you were sick. Later they changed the story, said you had to work. By the reception, you were suddenly traveling for business." I could picture it perfectly. My parents spinning excuses like they were pulling them from a hat, each one less believable than the last. "And did they buy it?" I asked. Grandma gave a dry laugh. "Not a word of it. One of your cousins was chatting with the bride's mother over dinner. Let slip that you'd been gone from Virginia for months, and no one in the family really kept in touch." The woman asked a few more questions. By dessert, she'd heard enough to know something wasn't right. I closed my eyes, imagining the scene. Round tables covered in white cloths, centerpieces of roses drooping in the candlelight. Felicity in her pristine dress, her smile stretched thin, her eyes darting nervously. My parents hovering, faces tight, brittle grins plastered on like armor. "And the in-laws?" I asked. "Oh, they figured it out," Grandma said, "and they didn't like it one bit. By the end of the night, there were pointed questions. Why they'd never met you, why Felicity seemed to be the only child who mattered. Your parents got defensive, and the mood shifted. Everyone could feel it." I almost smiled. It wasn't joy, not exactly, but a deep, solid satisfaction. The truth, after years of being buried, had slipped free in the one place they wanted it hidden most. Grandma continued, her voice steady but carrying the weight of what she'd seen. "Your mother tried to laugh it off, said you were private, independent. But the bride's parents weren't fooled. They've got sharp eyes, that family. They saw the way Felicity clung to her father's arm, desperate for approval, and the way your parents scrambled to keep the spotlight fixed. They saw through it." I pictured the in-laws, polite smiles masking sharp judgments, whispering behind crystal glasses, a united front crumbling in real time. "And Felicity?" I asked, unable to stop myself. "She looked fragile," Grandma admitted. Her smile never quite reached her eyes. I don't think she expected the questions. She wanted a perfect day, and instead she got cracks spreading across the picture frame. A silence hung between us then, filled only by the soft hum of my refrigerator. "She'll blame me," I said finally. "Yes," Grandma said gently. "They all will." Later that night, long after we hung up, I found myself pacing the length of my living room. My glass of wine sat untouched on the table, the red liquid catching light from the street lamps outside. For years, I had told myself my absence didn't matter, that I was invisible, unneeded. But here it was, the truth. My absence was powerful, powerful enough to expose the fault lines they'd worked so hard to plaster over. And part of me, darker, sharper, was glad. I pictured Felicity, her lace sleeves clinging tight to her arms, her perfect hair stiff under the weight of hairspray. I imagined the moment she realized her fairy tale wasn't untouchable, that her parents' devotion came with cracks too deep to hide. But satisfaction came laced with unease. Because Grandma was right, they wouldn't forgive me for this. Not now, not ever. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a new message. Felicity. "You made me look bad in front of his parents. They're questioning everything now. Do you realize what you've done?" I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. Then I hit delete without replying. But more followed. Accusations, guilt trips, even a half-hearted plea. "We can fix this together if you just come home." By the third day, my parents joined in. Mom's messages stretched long, each word designed to cut. "Family loyalty is not optional. We raised you. We gave you everything. How dare you repay us with betrayal?" Dad's came like orders. "Enough. Apologize. Come home. Do it now." One after another, their voices filled the device in my hand, like ghosts trying to claw through the glass. And yet, for the first time in years, I didn't answer. At night, lying in bed, I replayed Grandma's words. "They'll blame you." She hadn't been warning me. She'd been preparing me. Because this wasn't just fallout. It was the opening volley of a war I hadn't asked for. And as I stared at the dark ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside my window, I felt it building. The storm they were about to unleash. The first text after the wedding I could ignore, the second too. But by the third day, my phone lit up so often it felt like a second heartbeat. Fast, insistent, impossible to silence without cutting it out entirely. Felicity's messages filled the screen like venom in silk wrapping. "You embarrassed me in front of his parents. They're questioning everything now. Do you realize what you've done to me?" Her tone shifted with each one, sliding between accusation, guilt, and pleading. "Lore, we can fix this. Just come home, please." But there was nothing genuine in it. Even the pleas rang hollow, less about me than about salvaging the image she needed. I deleted them all. By the fourth day, my parents joined in. Mom's messages were sprawling paragraphs, her weapon of choice always emotional leverage. "Family loyalty isn't optional. You may think you're grown, but you owe us. After everything we've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay us? By humiliating us in front of Felicity's new family?" Each word carried the same old sting, the same twisted narrative, where sacrifice meant erasing me and loyalty meant silence. Dad's messages came in blunt bursts, commands that left no room for interpretation. "Call your mother. Fix this. Enough." I set the phone face down, heart pounding, but even in silence, the words seemed to seep through the table, into my skin. That night, I dreamt of a confrontation that never happened. In the dream, I was back in their house. The kitchen smelled faintly of roasted chicken, the table set for 4. My mother's lipstick was too red, my father's tie too tight. Felicity sat across from me in her perfect dress, her hand glittering with the diamond ring I'd never been invited to admire in person. "You ruined my wedding," she hissed, her voice soft enough to seem polite, but sharp enough to draw blood. I looked at my parents. They sat in silence, eyes fixed on me like I was the problem, like I had arrived uninvited in my own memory. "I didn't ruin anything," I said in the dream, my voice steady, calm. "I just wasn't there to cover for you." But in the dream, they laughed, all 3 of them. The sound filled the room, echoing until it broke into something darker. I woke drenched in sweat, my sheets tangled around me. The silence of my Portland apartment pressed in like walls. By the end of the week, my choice became clear. If I let the noise continue, it would devour me. So I did what I should have done years ago. I changed my number. I sent the new one only to Grandma, Marcus, and Jenna, the people who had proven they deserved it. Then I went further. I scrubbed my address from every online listing I could find, tightened my social media until it was nothing but a locked shell. I even set new email filters, catching anything with their names before it reached me. The moment I hit save on the last setting, the silence fell like a curtain. Not relief, not yet, but quiet. And quiet was a start. The days that followed were strangely still. I filled the space with work, pouring myself into projects, volunteering for assignments, anything to remind myself I wasn't defined by their absence or their anger. But some nights, when the city outside my window grew too quiet, I wondered what they were saying about me. Were they furious in private, ranting over the dinner table about the ungrateful daughter? Or were they crafting new stories for the outside world, reshaping my absence into another palatable lie? A darker thought lingered too. Had they finally written me off completely, erasing me the way they always had, but this time for good? One evening, as I watered the basil plant on my balcony, I caught myself whispering out loud, "They'll find another way in." The words startled me. I hadn't meant to say them, but once spoken, they lingered like smoke. Because even as I built walls, I knew them. Knew their persistence, their hunger for control. Grandma's warning echoed in my mind. They won't let this go quietly. And deep down, I knew she was right. This wasn't an ending. It was only a pause. The silence that followed cutting them off was almost unbearable at first. Like walking into a room where someone had just been shouting, only to find the air still vibrating with their absence. But slowly it shifted. I began to notice things I'd missed before. The way morning sunlight stretched across the kitchen tiles, the rhythm of my footsteps echoing in the hallway, the sound of rain threading softly against the balcony door. For the first time, quiet wasn't punishment. It was possibility. Work became my anchor. I took on extra projects, volunteered for assignments that scared me, poured hours into perfecting code until my eyes blurred. Each success built on the last, forming a ladder I hadn't realized I was climbing. 3 months later, I sat across from Dana in her office, the air humming faintly with the sound of her computer fan. She slid a folder across the desk, her expression unreadable. "You've proven yourself," she said simply. "We'd like to offer you a new contract, higher pay, more responsibility." I opened the folder, the numbers leaping out like sparks, a raise big enough to shift my life from someday to soon. For a long moment, I just stared, my chest tightened, not with fear, but with something sharper, cleaner, triumph. "Congratulations, Isla," Dana added. "You've earned this." Her words stayed with me longer than the numbers did. "You've earned this." No one in my family had ever said that. Not once. I funneled every extra dollar into savings. I cut back on luxuries, not out of necessity, but out of focus. Each sacrifice was a brick in the foundation of something bigger. By spring, I found myself sitting in the passenger seat of a realtor's car, staring out the window as neighborhoods rolled past. Craftsman houses with wraparound porches, tidy bungalows with flower beds blooming in bright defiance. One afternoon, we pulled up to a small house on a quiet street. Lilac bushes lined the walkway, their scent drifting through the open windows. The paint on the siding was chipped. The steps creaked when I climbed them, but the air inside was light, open, full of echoes waiting to be filled. 3 bedrooms, a kitchen with enough counter space to actually cook, a garden that caught the morning sun. When the realtor handed me the keys, I closed my fingers around them like they were something sacred. The deed had only my name, no cosigner, no whispered reminder of who helped me. No one could take it from me. For the first time in my life, the space in front of me wasn't borrowed. It was mine. That first night, I slept on a mattress in the living room, surrounded by bare walls and unopened boxes. The windows were cracked open, letting in the cool breath of spring. I woke before sunrise, watched light creep slowly across the walls, touching every corner as if claiming it. I walked through the empty rooms barefoot, listening to the hollow sound of my steps. Each one reminded me, you did this, you built this, alone. But even as pride swelled in me, a shadow threaded through. I imagined them here, standing on the porch, knocking at the door, reminding me that blood ties were never so easily severed. I pictured my mother's voice, brittle but insistent. "This house doesn't erase us, Isla." I shook the thought away, gripping the keys tighter in my palm. In the weeks that followed, I moved in slowly, deliberately. No rush to fill the rooms. I chose each piece carefully, not for appearances, but for what it meant. A wooden dining table I could imagine friends laughing around. A second-hand armchair that fit perfectly by the front window. Curtains that caught the morning sun. Each item was a declaration. This is my space, my life, my choice. Sometimes, though, as I stood in the kitchen, slicing vegetables, or sat in the garden with a book, a flicker of unease would pass through me. A memory, sharp and uninvited, my father's voice saying, "Family is everything." And I wondered, not for the first time, what he'd do if he knew just how much I'd built without him. The day the final papers arrived, signed, sealed, official, I called Grandma. "I'm standing in my own house," I told her, my voice trembling with disbelief. There was a pause, and then her laugh, soft and proud. "Oh, Isla, you did it. You made a home." "I wish you were here," I admitted. "One day soon," she promised. "I want to see it with my own eyes, to sit at your table, to drink tea in your garden." I pressed the phone to my ear, closing my eyes. "You will. I'll make sure of it." That night, I stood on the porch, the lilacs breathing their perfume into the cool air, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: safety. But even as I locked the door behind me, a thought curled like smoke at the back of my mind. Safety was fragile. And if history had taught me anything, it was that my family hated anything they couldn't control. Grandma arrived on a Friday afternoon, stepping out of the cab with her small suitcase in one hand and a wide smile stretching across her face. The driver set her bag on the sidewalk, and she stood for a moment, just looking at the house. "It's beautiful," she said at last, her voice soft, but filled with something that made my throat tighten. Pride. I hurried down the porch steps to hug her, breathing in the faint scent of lavender that always clung to her sweaters. She held me longer than usual, her grip strong despite her age. "Welcome home," I whispered. Her eyes shone. "No, sweetheart, this is your home." Inside, she moved slowly through each room, pausing in doorways as if she were walking through a museum. "3 bedrooms here," I told her, my voice carrying a mixture of disbelief and pride. "A kitchen that actually has counter space, and a garden in the back. Wait until you see it." She chuckled, setting her suitcase down by the stairs. "Do you remember when you were little, always drawing houses in your notebooks? You'd tell me, 'One day, Grandma, I'll build a place with windows everywhere so the light can come in.' I had forgotten that, or maybe buried it. Hearing her recall it made my chest ache in a way that was almost sweet. That evening, we cooked together in the kitchen. She chopped herbs while I stirred soup, the smell of garlic and rosemary filling the air. It felt like a ritual, the two of us moving easily around each other as though the space had been waiting for her. "You've made something here," she said quietly, sliding parsley into the pot. "Not just a house, a life." We carried our bowls to the porch and ate as the sky blushed gold and deepened into indigo. The garden was quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. I found myself watching her instead of the sunset, the way her lined face softened in the evening light. "You don't know how much I needed this," I admitted. "For so long I felt like I was holding my breath. Now I can breathe." She reached over, squeezing my hand. "You deserve peace, Isla. You always have." The next morning we walked through the garden together. She bent to touch the lavender, her fingers grazing the blossoms. "Your grandfather planted lavender in our yard once," she said, her eyes misting. "He used to say the smell reminded him of second chances." I smiled. "Then it's fitting it's here." She looked at me, her gaze steady, sharp, despite her age. "You've given yourself a second chance. Don't let anyone take it from you." Her words hung in the air, heavier than they sounded. That night, over mugs of tea in the living room, she grew more serious. The steam curled between us like smoke, fragile and vanishing. "I need to tell you something," she began. My stomach tightened. "What is it?" She hesitated, choosing her words. "When you were a child, I tried to talk to your parents about the way they favored Felicity, about how invisible you were becoming. Your father, he didn't want to hear it, said I was imagining things. Your mother went along with him, as she always did." Her eyes flicked to mine, sorrow lingering there. "I should have done more. I should have shouted louder. I wanted to protect you, but I held back." My throat burned. "You did more than anyone. You were the only one who saw me." She shook her head. "It was never enough. And now I see the same patterns in them still. They don't just want control. They need it. And they'll come for you again, Isla. I need you to be ready." I sat back, the tea cooling in my hands. "Ready for what?" "For their anger," she said simply. "For the way they'll twist things. They can't stand the idea of losing you. Not because they love you, but because it proves they aren't perfect." Her voice caught on that last word, and for a moment she looked tired, older than I'd ever seen her. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that my silence, my distance, was enough to hold them at bay. But the memory of the wedding fallout, of Felicity's bitter texts, of my parents' relentless messages, silenced me. "They'll try again," she whispered, "and when they do, you'll have to decide whether to let them in or finally shut the door for good." We didn't speak of it again that night. Instead, we drifted back to lighter things, recipes, memories of my grandfather, stories of her garden. But even as she laughed softly over her tea, her earlier words lingered like an echo. "Be ready." When she left on Sunday afternoon, I stood on the porch watching her cab pull away. The house behind me felt warmer for having her in it, but her warning clung to the walls, settling into the silence like a secret I couldn't ignore. I locked the door and leaned against it, the keys cool in my palm. For the first time since buying the house, I felt the fragile line between my peace and their chaos. And I realized Grandma was right. It wasn't over. After Grandma left, the house felt different. Not emptier, never emptier, but settled, as though her presence had anchored something in its walls. I slipped easily back into my routines, mornings with coffee in the garden, afternoons filled with work that stretched but didn't break me, evenings softened by books and the quiet hum of rain against the windows. The silence was no longer something I guarded, out of fear of it being broken. It was woven into the fabric of the life I'd built, steady and constant, like breath. Sometimes, though, I would find myself standing in the kitchen or walking the garden path, and a shadow of a thought would slip in. What if they came back? What if the phone rang, or a letter appeared in the mailbox, or worse? What if I opened the front door one morning to find them standing on the porch, carrying the same brittle smiles, rehearsed apologies, and endless demands? I told myself I was ready, that I had drawn a line in the sand, clear and final. But even now their voices lived inside me, my father's words echoing, "Family is everything," my mother's threats disguised as care, Felicity's sweetness wrapped around control. They were ghosts I hadn't invited, but ones I'd carried so long they felt stitched into me. One evening, I wandered the garden as the sun dipped low, shadows stretching across the lavender and mint. I touched the lilacs by the porch, their blossoms trembling in the breeze. "You've made something here," Grandma had said. "Not just a house, a life." I repeated the words softly like a spell, grounding myself in the truth of them. This was my life, built by my hands. No one could rewrite that, no matter how many stories they spun. Inside, the rooms were still sparse, echoes trailing after me when I walked from one to the next. But I liked the emptiness. It felt honest. It left space for the right people, the ones who showed up because they wanted to, not because they had to. I pictured Marcus and Jenna laughing around the dining table, mugs of coffee warming their hands. I pictured Grandma sitting in the sunny front room, tea steaming between us, her eyes soft but watchful. That was the family I chose, the family worth keeping. One night, I stood at the front door, the house dark except for a single lamp glowing in the living room. I opened it and looked out. The street was quiet, bathed in dusk. I let myself imagine them there. My mother shifting her purse higher on her shoulder, my father's jaw set tight, Felicity clutching her phone like a lifeline. I imagined their voices, sharp and brittle, slicing into the still air. Then I closed the door. The latch clicked softly, final. I leaned against the wood, pressing my palm flat against it, feeling the cool grain under my skin. There was a time when I would have opened it wide, desperate for even a scrap of belonging. But not anymore. The house glowed behind me, light spilling across the floorboards. I breathed in, slow and steady, and let the quiet settle deep into my bones. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need their explanations. My life was full without them. And for the first time, I knew the line between the family I was born into and the family I would keep. I had drawn it myself, and I would never step back over it. Outside, the wind shifted through the lilacs, carrying their scent into the night. Inside, I turned off the lamp, the house slipping into darkness, safe and mine. I shut the door on the world I had left behind. And somewhere, faint and far away, I thought I heard the echo of footsteps still trying to find their way back to me. But I didn't open the door. Not this time. Not ever again.